Hello boys and girls. So this is a follow-up to last night's NLP meetup group here in Kuala Lumpur, which was called the Battle of the Sexes. What I tried to do is organise I do regular NLP meetup groups here in Kuala Lumpur. And what I tried to do is organise the group in such a way as it would be 50% men and 50% women. So, you know, the battle would be fair. Unfortunately, we ended up with like 9 women and about 5 guys, and one of the guys who was there with his wife. So what I wanted to do, I set my stall up early. I said, look, I want this to work like a think tank, rather than us just sitting here and spitting back opinions and prejudices in terms of gender roles and that kind of thing. Let's pretend we're a think tank and let's come up with 5 major problems and 5 major solutions. And we went at it for about 2 hours, and honestly it's one of the best NLP meetup groups I've ever had. For me, I found it the most entertaining. I deliberately didn't say that much. I was like trying to be a moderator and not offering too much opinion. We didn't get 5 key issues. We're going to carry it on next week, but we did come up with 3 key issues. I was asking what are the essential differences between men and women that cause friction? We all agreed, you know, as a group, there is friction between men and women. There seems to be a difference in the way that men and women see things, and that causes massive amounts of tension and friction. Tension and friction obviously being necessary in order for sex to occur successfully. That's a key point, bear it in mind. So what did we cite? Well, the first 3 key areas that we said where there was major differences was, the first one was men and women process information differently. They seem to think differently. And somebody came up with one of the lads there said, men are more task orientated and women are more process orientated. Added to that, one of the ladies who came to the meetup group said women are more into detail and men and see that focus in on details and stuff, and men are more big picture in general. Now, I didn't agree or disagree with either of those views. As I say, I was being a moderator that night, but the map is not the territory. Something like that certainly seems to be going on. There certainly seems to be a difference in focus between process orientated and task orientated communication, and being very focused on the little details and the context. So for me, the definition I would have given is women are more context focused, men are more content focused. But they're different ways of saying the same thing. What kind of arguments does that create? It creates the argument, the stress that can happen, and this is one of my biggest problems communicating with women. All women, not just in a relationship, but like within my family, my friends. I like to have female friends around me. Is the communication of stories. So you tell me your story, and I ask you, you know, what's the story? And you go all the way around the houses to tell a story. You're setting the context. And I've sat and observed quietly when women do this with each other. Say a girl is like, I had a car crash today. So girl number 1 talks to girl number 2. I'm using girl and woman interchangeably here. Girl number 1 talks to girl number 2. I had a car crash today. Oh really, did you? Yeah, I did. I had a car crash. Well, anyway, so I went to get a sandwich at that shop. That, you know, the shop that's opposite the Labadega on Jalan Selawi. Oh yeah, I know that shop. And they start talking about the backstory to the car crash. And or the car bump. Now, if that was 2 men talking, and I said to my mate says, this actually happened recently. My mate said, oh, somebody hit my car. I said, what happened? He said, well, I was downstairs in the garage, and the Chinese woman who lives across the flats over the way there, she backed into me and she hit my car. And it took like 15 seconds to communicate the essence of the story. In the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, which is a book with a lot of problems, I know. And it's not massively scientific, but one of the things that is pointed out, and it does seem to be true, is men with this content-orientated, task-orientated way of thinking about things, we like to get to the point, and we like the mechanics of a situation. You know, who did what to whom? What are the facts? Tell me the raw facts. You want to fill in the details later, that's fine, But in order to know how you had a car crash, I don't need to know what flavour sandwich you ate 2 hours before, the conversation you were having on the phone with your girlfriend who's got a problem with her boyfriend who's apparently been cheating again whilst you were having the fucking crash. I don't need that detail. I need all that filtered. That seems to be a very prevalent problem. And you know, one of the things that I wanted to get into is how can we fix these things. So I'll talk about solutions in a little bit. The second thing that we brought up that was interesting to me as the moderator is I said to the group, okay, that's one thing we've got there. We've got task orientated and we've got process orientated. What's another problem that comes up? How do men and women think differently? Tell me. And 3 of the girls there repeated this several times. Women are more emotional. Women are just more emotional. Women are just more emotional thinkers. And I was like, fucking hell. If we had feminists here, they would stone you, man. It's always amusing to me. It's sometimes sad, sometimes amusing when I see women reinforcing negative stereotypes about women. Now, in this context, it was actually pointed out being more emotional has a definitely negative connotation. But my point that I just need to make here as a side note is, when I argue with feminists, which I generally try and avoid doing because it's like arguing with flat earthers or religious cultists. I just recently had an argument with a feminist over my use of the word pussy, calling somebody a pussy. Anyway, I won't go into that. Is one of the things that I notice is a lot of negative stereotyping actually comes from women. Women encourage and enforce negative behaviours in others. And I was going to do a video about this a couple of weeks ago called Who are the Biggest Misogynists, Men or Women? And that is a good video title, and I will do that one day. But it just popped into my head. So last night, how do we justify it? One of the guys there actually said, okay, we're using the word emotional, which if we're not careful, are you fucking kidding me? Really? If we're not careful, could have a negative connotation in the same way, you know the word hysteria, as in something is hysterical, ha ha ha, it's very funny, or I went into a state of hysteria, I went crazy. Apparently that comes from, I can't remember if it's a Greek or Latin word, but the root word etymologically for hysteria is hysteria means cervix. And what they used to believe in ancient times is that if a woman was having like a panic attack or flipping out, then she was hysterical because her womb was actually travelling around her body. And that's what hysteria means. So when you laugh at something and you say it's hysterical, what you mean is I laughed so hard my womb was moving around my body. It's a very old, is it just a sexual prejudice? Again, I don't know. The people who were citing it last night were women. Or is it something real? And then you've got the whole question of, is this a genetic thing or is this a cultural thing that is indoctrinated into us? I would suspect that the truth is probably somewhere in between the two. So that was another thing that came up, is that men are more rational, women are more emotional, and it was the women in the group who were saying that. Somebody, as I say, said rather more diplomatically that perhaps we could argue that women have more emotional intelligence and men have more, what's the opposite of emotional intelligence? IQ style intelligence. Now, that's something I can get behind. I have noticed from an earlier age, women seem to be able to judge the contextual, there's a kind of thinking that I've been thinking about recently a lot, which is context related thinking. Like, some people seem to lack the ability to place your words in context. Some people are just being dicks. Sometimes if you want to be a cock, you can just, oh, I said cock. Oh, where are the feminists now to tell me off for using the male genitals to mean that somebody's something negative? If somebody's being a cock, or if you did want to be a cock, you can pretend you don't understand the other person's context. You can pretend, I don't know why you said that. I don't know the context. I don't understand jokes anymore. I understood jokes yesterday, and I'll understand jokes again tomorrow, but right now, because of this argument, I don't understand what jokes are. you can do that. But generally speaking, I have noticed there is, from an earlier age, a better grasp of contextual thinking. There does seem to be more emotional intelligence there. There does seem to be more emotional flexibility and strength there from an earlier age. We often talk about women being the fairer sex. And that this is rooted in the idea that because women are physically weaker than men, that therefore they're emotionally weaker than men. Well, for any men who've been through a divorce or a difficult breakup or any of that kind of thing, or who've just basically got any experience with women long term, that's a laughable idea. In my opinion, when it comes to the battleground of emotions and psychology, men get their asses kicked every time. We don't even understand the rules of that game. Most of the time we don't even know we're playing that game. But this is a game that women have understood since they were, maybe not little girls, but teenagers, 13, 14 years old. They learn how to fight in that arena. So I would agree with this, that I wouldn't go with the women are more emotional, men are more rational thing, because there's a possibly negative connotation there. And in my opinion, when women respond emotionally to stuff, when guys are responding rationally, it's lack of training. I did have this problem with my last girlfriend, and I managed to get it out of her. She got it from her mum. Every time she saw a big insect, or if the lights were dark, she would act very, very frightened. That was not good English that I just came out with. That last sentence was not good. Sorry about that. If she saw, say, a bee flies into the room, she'd freak out, go, oh my god, a bee! Or if there was a loud noise behind her, she'd be like, oh my fucking god! Or she couldn't walk in the dark. And she got all that because I noticed her mum was exactly the same, and we all acquire our parents' phobias. For example, both my parents are terrified of roller coasters, so I'm scared of roller coasters. It will tend to happen. But I decided that I didn't really see that as part of her personality, because the rest of her personality wasn't like that. She wasn't a girly girl. She was quite a pragmatic, she wasn't a little princess. She was a very pragmatic, quite a strong-willed person. I said, you just got to stop it. It's a habit and you need to break it. And within about 3-4 months, we had brought it right the way down. And she was like, oh yeah, I don't actually really get that scared. And I'm like, okay, it's just an unconscious reaction that is floating through you. Now you need to take conscious control of it. So the idea of women being more intrinsically emotional, as in some tragic scenario plays out and their first response is to not be able to deal with it effectively. Okay, maybe. I'm not saying yes or no, because I can't know that without massive amounts of scientific experimentation, most of which will probably be redundant anyway. We can't know that. What I can tell you for a fact is, because I've trained women for over 12 years now, is whatever the initial response is, you can retrain it. So if the initial response is not helpful, emotional irrationality, you can train back in rationality. And similarly with men, if they're being too rational and they can't do context thinking, they can't pick up body language signals, meta-communication, tone of voice, and I know a good few guys who are like that, where I'm like, do you really not know what I'm trying to say? Can you really not think about the context in which this conversation is occurring, and you can't work out what I'm trying to say? Come on, dude, get a grip. The third thing that we came up with was an issue that was related to expectation, which is basically to say that, look, if there is friction between men and women in relationships, often it can come down to expectations not being met. The young lad who was there said that the last relationship he was in, he argued a lot with his girlfriend because he was not decisive enough. Now, I sympathise. It's a bugbear of mine when people are indecisive. It sets me off. I get really I'm an impatient, narky guy most of the time anyway. I'm comfortable with that. Narky people make the world turn round, okay? Grumpy people, you need grumpy people. You need impatient people. But indecisiveness, I really struggle with. If I put myself in a girl's shoes and my man is indecisive, I think it would drive me fucking insane. Because if I flirt into the realm of potential sexism here, if you take the traditional view, or perhaps even the biological view, or the evolutionary psychology view, that there are two different roles to be performed in a relationship. And some people find that idea abhorrent, and it started a big argument last night, which I had to actually time out on. I'm into it. I buy into it. I'm quite traditional in that point of view. I think men have certain strengths, women have certain strengths, you bring them together, they're a complement. I don't think, and I don't like to see, oh shit, I've got to be careful here, women acting like men, men acting like women, us becoming androgynous, and then it destroys sexual polarity. I'm not saying that means that doesn't mean I'm real rigid about roles in the home and women can't. So what you're saying is women can't work? No, I'm saying women can work. So what you're saying is men can't cook and parent their children? No, I'm saying they can do that. They should do that. But we need to understand masculine and feminine polarity and why it's necessary in a relationship. A couple of other things, another area that came up last night is, should somebody be in control? And a lot of people, should somebody be on top in the relationship? I believe yes. And I think it should be men. Just so you all know, that's where I'm coming from. I do think that men should be the guy in charge in a relationship. And I'm not the first person to point this out. In a relationship with a man and a woman, where the woman is in control, they're never happy. Now, and what I mean by that is, they are usually deeply unhappy. So to come back to this thing of gender roles, if I was a woman and I was in a relationship with a man and I was taking care of my end and all my areas as a woman of what I'm supposed to bring to the relationship, I expect you to do certain things in the relationship. Now, I teach self-defense. I have a certain mindset. This channel is called the Spartan Life Coach channel, so obviously I'm going to approach this from a certain point of view. I think men and women should learn how to fight. I think men should learn how to do certain things in the home as well. But intrinsically, the core of what I believe in is there is a natural order to things, and men should be men and women should be women. I'm not saying men should never do anything feminine or women should never do anything masculine, but you need to understand that there is a balancing of energies here, and if you take away that polarity and androgynize people, things get weird and they stop working. Again, another thing, you could say, did you not believe in same-sex relationships? No, I've got mates who are in same-sex relationships and they're absolutely fine. But fundamentally, somebody's in charge, and somebody's being a boy and somebody's being a girl. And there are slang words for this within the gay community and gay culture. The lesbians have their own terms for this, the gay guys have their own terms for this. So it seems, even though if you're a religious person, you go, what they're doing is unnatural. Well, even though what they're doing may or may not be natural, and let's just bear in mind that there are many mammals who engage in homosexual activity. Let's just bear that. If we're going to talk nature and biology, humans, you'll hear it said, oh, it's only humans and monkeys who do gay stuff. No, there's a ton of animals that engage in homosexual activity. So that whole natural thing, let's put that in context. And also, there is a natural order to this. People take roles. So, those are the main three areas that we covered last night. Expectations not being met, men being more rational, women being more emotional. The way I would phrase it is women being more engaged in emotional intelligence and men being more engaged in IQ style intelligence. That can cause friction. Men being more task orientated and women being more process orientated. Or as somebody else put it, men being involved in the general big picture and women being involved in the details. These were the things that were brought up. So then we started to talk about what are the solutions. Now I wanted to find 5 key areas and 5 solutions. We found 3 key areas. We're going to do this again next week. So a couple of really good solutions that came up that need to be talked about. One, a nice simple solution for dealing with arguments. This came from Victor. He said what he does in his house is when they start to get heated, he says, okay, stop. I'm going to go and make the tea. You go and prepare the biscuits and let's sit down and let's do this again in 5 minutes. Now the time scale is important. Victor brought it up. He said he'd seen a study. I don't know the study, but he said you take a break and you take a time out and it should be 5 to 15 minutes. When you're getting really heated, you time out but it's 5-15 minutes. He said, don't leave it half an hour. Then you start internalizing the emotions and they're not being expressed, and then things are going to settle too much. From an NLP perspective, we could say this is a good pattern interrupt. I'm not of the view that we should spend a lot of time shouting and screaming at each other and arguing, because if I look at your face and hear the sound of your voice while I'm feeling a lot of rage, then I'm anchoring your face, your voice to feelings of rage and frustration and, you know, whatever else. That's not, over the years, that will be a passion killer. Eventually you will just stop having sex because it's too much. There's too much negative anchoring going on there. Another thing that it does, it's a good way of being assertive, and we talked about being assertive last night as a way of avoiding a lot of problems in a relationship. Another thing that was brought up by a lady there who's a counsellor herself, who's done relationship therapy, is that there should be a boundary setting exercise early on in the relationship. I'm 100% down for that, but I've been in and out of 2 long-term relationships that ended disastrously. I'm 35, I've been a counsellor, psychologist on and off for 15 years, so of course I'm of that view, but people protested. They said it's not sexy, and I agreed. I said it's not sexy, but divorce isn't sexy. Breaking up with somebody and crying and, you know, that awful moment where they have to come and get their stuff out of your house, or, you know, you have to go and get your stuff out of their house, that's not sexy either. And a lot of this stuff can be avoided. Prevention's better than cure. You're better off dealing with it up here now than 5 years down the line. Then is the question of how to do that. Are you actually going to go and sit, like in month 3 of dating somebody, are you really going to go and see a counsellor and work out your boundaries? Well, as unsexy as it might sound, as fucking neurotic as it might sound, you don't necessarily have to go and do something as extreme as getting a professional in, but the more you make the unconscious expectations conscious and open and explicit, don't leave it implicit, don't leave it implied. You have rules that the other person doesn't have. Of course I don't want you to X, Y, Z. But unless that person knows, they're going to stand on a fucking landmine that you didn't tell them was there, so it's not fair. So we actually found some good solutions last night. Time outs, tea break. I actually thought this was a great British tradition, but like most great British traditions, we nicked it from the colonies, and obviously the tea tradition we nicked from China, who possibly nicked it from Japan. I'm not going there. The time out, asserting boundaries, you know, learning how to argue as a skill set, which is something we didn't even get into last night because it just wasn't time. But that would possibly be a useful skill set in a relationship, and a boundary setting exercise. And I would say I would take it further than that. How fucking neurotic am I? I would want the boundaries reset yearly in a relationship. And it doesn't have to be like a boundary setting exercise per se. I think you should reset your objectives. You should, as a team, as a couple, I'm speaking as a single man here, as a team, as a couple, it would, from what I've seen of the last 5 years of being single and doing counselling and doing relationship therapy with people, if your objectives don't match and you're no longer congruent at the values level, 2 things need to happen. Compromise that works out, for negotiation and compromise that is a win-win, or you need to separate, because you will separate in the end anyway. So that was what came out of the Battle of the Sexes thing last night. I hope you guys found that useful and interesting as well. I thought it was a great topic. I'm going to plunge deeper into this topic because one of the things that we didn't even touch on last night, and unfortunately we did drift into what I would call the Oprah Winfrey reality tunnel, which is, oh, this is the way things should be. You know, you should be 2 whole people together and do things together and respect it. Blah, bollocks. It doesn't work like that, because people aren't whole. People aren't sane, they're not perfectly formed. One of the things we didn't touch on last night is, what do you do when somebody's being a dickhead? It's all very well having a boundary setting exercise between 2 rational people, but most people aren't rational, and relationships and the deep button pushing that comes through intimate sexual relationships brings up a lot of psychological junk. That's when the real work kicks in. So what I just gave you for the last 15-20 minutes, that's like yellow belt, blue belt syllabus of relationship jitsu. You want to be looking at the black belt stuff later on, which is how do you deal with these dark patches in each other's psyche that are going to be provoked and stimulated, those buttons will be pushed in a relationship, and then things get deep and dark and mysterious. Okay guys, hope you enjoyed that, and as soon as we've done another meetup or I've got some more stuff to talk about on this subject, I'll post again. Please leave a like, a comment, whatever in the thing below, and I'll speak to you soon. Cheers.